Welcome, everyone, to the Pick Six podcast, where we discuss the biggest and best stories in college football. I'm your host, Chris Chang, and joining me, as always, is my co host, Rudy Tamarchio. Rudy, it's looking like this year's edition of the coaching carousel was going to be a little quiet, but then we saw one of the largest splashes in the history of the sport take place. Eight-time Super Bowl winning coach Bill Belichick agrees to become the next coach for the North Carolina Tar Heels. We speculated last week as talks began. Now it's official. You said it wasn't going to happen and that it wasn't going to work. Have you changed your mind since he signed?
No, like it's happening. Yeah, wrong there. Is it gonna work? I don't think so. There's a couple things that I was laughing at when they were first talking about the announcement. The 48 hours before they confirmed it, saying that he handed over this like 400-page Bible of things. And the first thing that went through my head was, oh, I've heard this story before. And granted, this is Bill Belichick. This isn't Al Golden coming to Miami in 2011 with a 200-page binder that says deserved victory on the top of it. But that's where my mind went at first. And I'm thinking, you don't fix things with a binder. Bill Belichick is the most brilliant coaching mind in football because he's been such a professional mind for so long. But let's remember some of his coaching tree that has left and has tried the college ranks. Think of like Charlie Weiss.
Oh, yep.
Remember Charlie Weiss,
Mm-hmm.
the
Kansas,
guy
Notre
with the
Dame
William
coach.
Howard Taft waistline and used to have like a deep fryer on the sideline for his plays? That's
His
the joke
his
I
his
always had
belt
with.
size was equator.
Yes, that was the joke that I always had with Dono. We were undergrads together at WVUM. We'd say like, "Oh, that play didn't work. It's going in the deep fryer that he must have on the sideline over at Notre Dame." And not to body shame in 2024, but essentially he was an NFL guy and a brilliant NFL offensive mind that just didn't translate over to the college game. Not everybody's Nick
Yeah.
Saban.
No, they're not. Well, North Carolina announced Wednesday that the university and Belichick had agreed to a 5-year deal reportedly worth up to $50 million. And I think the interesting part about this is there's a buyout clause starting in 2026. So if he gets fired before 2026, it's 25 million to get out. And then after that, it goes down to $1 million. So maybe the rumors of this being a stepping stone or a tryout or audition for the NFL may be true. This may be kind of scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. But Belichick's father, Steve, was an assistant coach at North Carolina from 1953 to 1955, so it kind of makes sense. Now, Rudy, let's get into the minutia of this. You've been a staunch opposer of this. Why do you think this isn't going to work out?
I just see the college game being so different because when you're an NFL coach, you're talking about very sophisticated style of play. You're
Yeah,
talking
that's true.
about, very cerebral in terms of how you're calling your defenses, how you're working your offense. You're having players. Yeah, let's eliminate like the whole idea of like the paying players, the NIL for a second, because even like let's take the recruiting completely out of it.
Okay.
Just from an X's and O's perspective, how different the college game, which is very basic, very simple. You're maybe holding players for 3 years at these days. You very rarely have a player that's around for all 4 years. You can't really run too many sophisticated things. Let's be homers for a second. Let's look at Miami and let's say they tried running a fairly sophisticated defense. How did that work out for them? Even the
Yeah.
most basic defense in terms of scheme didn't work out for that Miami Hurricanes accumulation of talent. So in terms of Bill, I feel like he's a not even a college professor. He's so much higher. He's like a Nobel laureate that's being hired to teach like elementary school. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
the
it might go
level.
over their heads, just putting it lightly.
Right. And like it's one thing to show people film, like, look, he's gonna be in there. He's like, look, you're my favorite players. All right. I'm gonna show you Lawrence Taylor. Who's that? My grandfather loved Lawrence Taylor. Shut up. Watch LT, watch Ed Reed, watch all of these guys. See what they do. You can't that those are guys who played for, Ed Reed played for over a decade in the NFL.
Yeah,
And he played for all 4 years at Miami. Or actually, sorry, he played for 3 years. But still, it's a different
I know what you're
way
saying.
of doing things.
Yeah, I would push back though on the 3-year thing, specifically in this situation, because the original rumors of the deal were three years, 30 million, which I mean, you extrapolate that over 5 years, 50 million. It's technically still kind of true. And again, it's always funny when you hear stories like this because you get things part and parcel. You get little bits here and there, and they're obviously coming from different sources or anonymous sources, things like that. And so there are things that may be true to a certain extent or that maybe weren't allowed to be out. And I'm starting to think, this 3-year number, and again, you go to the contract itself and the buyout clause, he may not even be there. I mean, the weird thing is he's 72, which is just 1 year younger than Mac Brown. And you wonder, I mean, how long he can coach for. I mean, I was listening to Adam Scheffler this morning talk about how Bill Belichick is really more like a 60-year-old or a guy in his 50s just because he's so energetic. But that's neither here nor there. I'm looking more at the deal in the sense of, well, how did 3 years, 30 million come out, but 5 years, 50 million comes out today? Again, it's kind of like those things where those backroom deals where it's like, hey, we'll agree to this and just with the understanding knowing that, I'll be out. Here's why I think it will work, right? Bill Belichick, I'm looking at him right now as a great combination of Nick Saban and Deion Sanders. So he's going to give you that strict systems kind of approach that Nick Saban has, but he's going to give you that flashy, like, I'm gonna handle this like a pro team like Dion does. Not to say that other programs haven't been doing this for years. Your Georgias, your Alabamas, your Ohio States, for example, your Oregons now. That not that they don't run pro programs, but there has been this talk over the years that there is a learning curve when you get to the NFL, which means that there's some sort of um, I guess there's some sort of leap you have to take intellectually to prepare yourself for the NFL. Now, if Bill's gonna say he's gonna bring that, I think that kind of gives him an edge. I think a lot of the posturing and positioning him and Mike Lombardi even today, his GM that he's gonna have are already great. Like everyone's talking about, well, how is Nick going to recruit? Well, he's already doing it. I mean, what he's saying isn't revolutionary and it isn't like miraculous in the sense that he wants to bring a pro style front office and system to college. People have been doing that for the better part of the last, at minimum, 5 years. I would say almost a decade. But that's what he's doing. That's his recruiting pitch to people in the transfer portal or kids thinking of going to UNC. He's like, hey, you come play for me. It's a pipeline to the NFL, which is basically kind of what Dion was kind of like pushing to himself. He was like, hey, I'm going to get you to the NFL. I'm going to run my program like it's an NFL team. You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to do this. I mean, and again, I use Dion specifically also because people are like, well, even his former players, Edelman, Gronk, and Tom Brady were like, they were asked earlier this week, they were like, hey, can you see Bill Belichick as a recruiter? And they're like, absolutely not. They all laughed it off, right? And the thing is he's not going to have to go make in-home visits because Dion doesn't do it, and Dion's getting guys. Now, again,
Well, he's got
extrapolate
more
that.
toes than Dion
Yeah,
does.
this is true, and this is what I'm saying, man. He's 10 toe. He's standing on business, 10 toes. Um, and he's gonna send Mike Lombardi. He's gonna have Mike Lombardi sending out his little minions. And again, we know today now it's yes, it's about the head coach, but it's also about relationships. And if like a lot of if Bill can get the right staff underneath him, it can make recruiting very easy. But again, I don't even know with Bill only signing this 5-year deal with the idea and my belief that he'll only probably be there about 3 years. He's gonna need those whole like 4-year experiments with kids. You know what I mean? Like I think he's got a plan. I don't think again, there's so many there's so many different intangibles about this story. Like, do you think this is a power play by North Carolina? Like, because for those of you not in the know, this is a little inside baseball, inside college football, but there is a massive civil war brewing between the administrative side of North Carolina and then the athletic department. Do you think this was a power move? Because this was not made by their athletic director. This was made by their administration. And then even the administration and the athletic director, Bubba, what's his name? I forgot what his name is. Bubba something. I just know his name's Bubba, which I thought was always funny because I'm like, that sounds like a Southern name. At ACC Media Days, were butting heads on the topic of whether they should leave the ACC, stay in the ACC. And I think the athletic director was like, hey, we're going to keep our options open. But then the president came in right afterwards during ACC Media Days, like, no, we are firmly devoted to the ACC. So do you think this is actually a deal for the betterment of the program, or do you think this was a power move?
I think it's probably both because I think there's look, the idea of there being friction between an athletic director and a university president is nothing new. What is kind of surprising, and it's something that I think you'd be surprised to see happens in other programs as well, is when the athletic director doesn't necessarily see the program in the same status as the university administration does. I think this
Yeah.
is a move to say North Carolina should be considered a top job. And yeah, Mac Brown was a big name, but this was also kind of a retirement stop for Mac Brown to come back home to a previous engagement that he had. The thought was, who's going to want a job at North Carolina after the disaster of a season that they had, and also kind of the disaster of what the ACC is as a conference? To get a
Yeah.
guy like Bill Belichick is to immediately add relevancy and say, we got one of the most, arguably the most established NFL coach, professional football coach of all time, a guy that's in the same, conversations as Don Shula and John Madden,
Yep.
people like that. That's a big deal. So for them to go do that and kind of go over the athletic director's head, saying, you know what, we don't really want your search. You just want to hire a search firm or go after a couple guys. We're gonna do. Should I go get like Shane Beamer from South Carolina, or go get like the East Carolina head coach, or maybe somebody else in the James Madison coaching tree since they lit us up this year for 70 points? No,
Yeah.
we want to go get somebody different. So I can understand that. But I think you'll be surprised to see how many athletic directors don't hold the program that they're supposed to be in charge of and be the top cheerleader and see them in the same relevance that a university administration might.
Well, I asked that because, again, this is why I use the Nick Saban plus Deion Sanders analogy, because if you look at the prime effect, right, what they're calling Deion's impact in Boulder, right, it saw a $113.2 million economic impact. So $113 million immediately poured into Boulder. Direct visitor spending actually increased by $10 million, and the average visitor spent $183 on accommodations compared to the year prior to Prime getting there, which was only about 100. So you're almost doubling what the average person is spending. You're pouring millions in. The other thing, I was trying to look up the exact number. I couldn't find it, but they did mention it being almost close to double with one, I think it was within black students, but it doesn't matter. Who cares about the ethnicity? But let's also look at the increase in enrollment and transfers.
That's
When
football in general. I mean, any school that does well in football, like any white kid
Alabama.
that comes out of South Florida, they all wanna go to Alabama now.
Yeah,
And when Miami was good, everyone wanted I mean, don't get me wrong, Miami's, overall I'll give you this stat, I don't know if you know about the most recent University of Miami enrollment stats or the application status. They're up to, like, over 50,000 applications for the
that's crazy.
freshman class that's incoming. And for both of us, the incoming class every year for freshmen, there's only 2,000 spots.
Yeah.
Which is
I think that's what a lot of people forget about Miami is, like, the student body with grads is only like 7 to 10,000. Like, it's not a very, like, we do not have like the UCF 65,000 undergrads, then add whatever graduate students they have, or even an FSU that's bordering like 40 to 50,000 students undergrad. Like, we only have with grad students about 10,000. I think it's like 7,000 undergrad and like 3,000 grad students.
I think Miami is actually like the second or third lowest attended ACC school
Mhm.
behind like Wake Forest is dead last, and I think
Yep.
it's like Boston College.
Yeah. So I think, in my opinion, because again, there are so many different aspects and intangibles to this deal because it's such a big splash and it's such a random program. Because again, no one, even like if you were to ask Michael Jordan, right? Like, what is UNC? UNC is a basketball school. They've never been known for being a football school, let alone a competitive football school. Or even like, there's a joke I'm on a bunch of podcasts that like UNC is not even known for being tough. Like, like there's nothing tough associated. Like,
Yeah,
you think of swag, you think of UM, right? You
right.
think of like, you think about like hard-nosed championship winning teams, you think of Alabama, you think of like things like that. Another reason why I thought this was a great pickup, besides the academic and the administrative portion, is when you think of coaches in college football today, right? Let's go to each conference, right? Who are your mainstays, right? You've got in the Big Ten, I mean, technically not right now, but Ryan Day, and then you have what's
Dan
his name
Lanning from
from
Oregon.
Dan Lanning from Oregon, right?
Yep.
Those are your two powerhouse. I would say Dan Lanning is the alpha in the Big Ten with Ryan Day right under him, right? And then you have a couple like mediocre coaches,
Hey,
and
don't
then
forget PJ Fleck from Minnesota. Row the boat.
yeah, right, yeah,
Row the
exactly.
or
Ski
your
you ma,
favorite James
ski
your
you
favorite
ma.
James Franklin over at Penn State.
By the way, the ski ma, if you don't know what that means, that's their like kind of like fight thing. It's actually hysterical if you look at the history of that. I'll let you guys go do that if you have time. But then you look at the SEC, right? And it's Kirby, right? Before it was Kirby and Nick, but now it's directly Kirby. And then you've got like a second tier, which would be like your
Lane Kiffin.
Lane Kiffins, I would say, the coach from Tennessee. What's his name?
Oh,
The
yeah, Josh Heupel.
Josh Heupel, you know what I mean? And then now with Texas being in there, you would say a Sark, right? The ACC, maybe Dabo, but Dabo really has been kind of off the past couple years, right? Is
Yeah,
it
like
Mario? Mario really hasn't proven himself. There's no coach in the ACC right now that is that alpha. You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to poo-poo on Mario. Okay, this is not a knock on
no,
Mario. This is just I'm just giving you a litmus test, and let's just be real with it, right? Like, and in reality, as a Miami fan, I'll tell you straight up, Mario hasn't proven anything. He hasn't won any big games that matter. You know what I mean? And we didn't get to the college football playoffs, and we should have. And we had a team that should have been in the playoffs. We have a
you had
Heisman
a
finalist.
you had a pendulum swing from one season to the next where you went from having an awful offense with a capable defense to having the most prolific offense in Miami history
History.
and arguably one of the worst defenses in Miami history
Oh,
to
I would,
compliment
yeah,
it.
and
So
I would almost say if not statistically, when you want to talk about pooping the bed, this is the worst Miami team because this and defense because this team and I'm not trying to go on a tangent, but like this team should be in the playoffs. And every time I look at the playoff bracket and I don't see us in there, it's infuriating. It's
it was
just
built to make a run.
yeah.
This roster was built to make a run, and it
And so
didn't
you
happen.
look at that, right? And you look at the success at Arizona State, at SMU, their first year. They were in a G5 conference last year, and now they're in the playoffs, right? You even look and use us as an example. You look at UM, and I used UM specifically because you're looking at is North Carolina private or public?
North Carolina, I think, is public, but it's a really well like it's the flagship school in the University of North Carolina system.
Right, but so it's like
Duke's
a
the private
it's
school in that one.
right. It's got an academic prestige to it, right? So it's
Yep.
it's it's I would say it's comparable to a UM, right? Where there's a high academic standard, and then they never really invested in football, right? You look at UM threw money behind the system, and look where we're at, right? We've got a Heisman finalist. We should have been playing for the playoffs this year. God willing, we'll be in the playoffs next year. So you see the breadcrumbs of if you get a decent quarterback, I'm a decent coach, right? If not a good coach, you put some money behind him, you'll see success. This isn't college football 10 years ago. This isn't BCS. This isn't early 14 playoff college football anymore. We're in the NIL transfer portal era, and we're in the infancy of it. And who better to take advantage of that than Bill Belichick, the master of bending the rules? I was joking with a friend, my group of friends who all watch college football. We have season tickets together. I'm like, there's not a better person to take advantage of this Wild West situation in college football right now better than Bill. Like, think about it. Like, Deflategate, like, you think about all the things Bill does to get in a competitive advantage. This guy is going to be pouring over we're going to see, I mark my words, we're going to see some crazy things happen this year that people are going to be like, oh, you can't. Oh, maybe you can do that.
You just nailed a point, by the way. You dropped an idea in my head that also is another reason why they're doing this. If you guys remember, and if you remember, the ACC is proposing to restructure its compensation plan with the member
Yep.
schools. And the main proponent of how they're going to divvy up the funds from like next year moving forward is going to be
Viewership.
television numbers.
Yep.
So, who's not going to want to watch, whether it's a train wreck or not, to see Bill Belichick coaching in college
I'm
football?
saying,
That's
and
the move right there.
And again, let's go back to my analogy, the Dion, the prime effect. Look at all the celebrities that are at the game. Look at all the people. You're not telling me that sideline in Chapel Hill isn't going to be full of NFL Hall of Famers, former coaches. Like I guarantee you in his first season, they may not go 10-2 or like 9-3, but One thing I will guarantee is you're going to see more NFL scouts on that sideline each and every Sunday, whether it's for an official visit or just because they're trying to do Bill a favor. You know what I mean? Like, that's why you bring him there, to get eyes there. And like you were saying, it just creates this ripple effect of just, I, again, I don't know if it's going to work out, but here's why I think it is a positive and why I think it could work out. The other side of this story is something you and I were talking about. I'm not sure if you remember this. We talked about this in the first show, and I'm not sure if it made the cut, but we had talked about it in our show notes. But nepotism in college football. Do you think this is a setup for his son Steve Belichick? It's not been official that he's leaving Washington yet, but there's a lot of smoke about that because he was his former defensive coordinator with the Patriots when he was still there.
Yep, and I think that's 100% what that is.
You do?
Because, I mean, look, Mark Richt came down to Miami and brought, John with him, and he ran the offense underneath him. This is another way of doing that. I'm sure Jed Fish, who, by the way, was a Miami offensive coordinator under Al Golden for a couple of years, also did some great stuff in the NFL, really did some good work with Stephen Morris as quarterback
Yep.
back
And
in
he
the
has
day.
ties to Belichick too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So a lot of stuff that's going on there. I would not be surprised. This is the way to get back close and work under dad again,
Ooh, but
possibly go
what?
back to
Okay.
the NFL.
Okay. With that said, what are the chances that Fish pulls a Chip Kelly and leaves a West Coast team to be an offensive coordinator?
I mean, it's tough because Chip Kelly had already done it in multiple places, right? Like he had that long run with Oregon. He went
Mhm.
to the NFL. He came back. He was with UCLA for a few years, and I think everyone kind of saw the handwriting on the wall with that from the beginning
That's
because
true. I
like
think Washington's in a better state than UCLA, you know?
yeah, it was in a little bit of a better state. I mean, granted, the departure of Kalen DeBoer to Alabama left this like vacuum, and like Jed Fish is not exactly like watch him on the sideline. He kind of looks like he's almost more like he's more apprehensive than like the Rick Neuheisel on the sideline. Not
Right.
exactly like a fiery guy. He's kind of one of those guys. He reminds me of the Boise State head coach,
Oh, yeah,
Peterson.
yeah, yeah.
He
Yep.
reminds me of Peterson when he was there. He's like this like small, like he's sitting there going, "Why am I here? Why am I coaching right now?" It's like he always had
Yeah,
some sort of like
he's always like on the
bad
sideline like
taste.
this. Hands are like this. He's like
Yes, he's
always watching. Yeah.
always confused.
Yeah.
So like he's not exactly the head coaching like he may have the head coaching knowledge, but he doesn't necessarily have the head coaching like aura and presence, and whether that's something he's going to develop or something he cares to do.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to see. Look, if you pull the ripcord after year one, that's one thing. But one thing before moving on the Belichick topic, there is one thing I want to talk to you about that I think is absolutely must see TV, and I think might actually benefit the ACC altogether, like overall.
What?
How is he going to react to the first stupid call that gets made on the sideline?
Oh man, yeah, well, that's gonna be to me again. I don't know how he got blessed with this, but it's gonna be gold next year, man. Because when you talk about like just like incompetency, like if he thought the NFL refs were bad, he has no idea what he's in for when he deals with these ACC officiating because it is tremendo, as we say here in Miami. It is just bad.
Do you think there's like a fine print somewhere in those like 400 pages that he has that says that North Carolina is going to pay for every single fine he like develops by criticizing officials? Because like you'll hear him say stuff in the NFL. I can't wait to see what happens when there's like a phantom holding call when they play Clemson that it turns back like a game-winning touchdown for them, or there's a call like there's a hold that's missed that ends up going for like a 90-yard touchdown for Clemson, and he may not like give it to them at the very moment there, but like in that post-game press conference, oh, I could already imagine this saying like, "What league did I get into here?" He might even use the whole. If you watch like Edelman and Gronk and all of them, the one analogy Belichick kept using in all of his meetings during the week was, "Man, Foxborough High School could have done that." I'm waiting for. I saw better refs at Foxborough High School games.
Yeah,
Waiting for it.
it's gonna be. I mean, again, though, this could be a catalyst to get these get this ACC officiating under control. Because I mean, again, there are very few voices in football that have an impact on things, right? And I think Belichick coming in will. I mean, hopefully, again, my hope is we'll force some changes in college football, whether it's getting this NIL and this shared revenue under control, because that's going to be another aspect. Like what we're witnessing in like a 5 to 7 year period is going to be the greatest change and the greatest evolution of this sport that we've ever seen throughout the history of the sport. Like if you compile the entire history, the 150 years we've been playing or 120 years we've been playing college football, these past 5 to 7 years, the changes that will occur will be with more than everything compiled together. Like it's going to be insane. And I'm wondering if you bring a voice like Bill Belichick in to kind of corral everything, and to kind of and bring some sort of okay, like we're going to start setting some rules down. We're going to start getting this stuff under control because this is way out of control. Because the biggest joke and the other thing, besides like, do you really see Bill like hitting a couch and doing an in-home visit? Is who, what's going to be like the first thing that happens when a player goes up to Bill and is like, hey, I need more money. You, you know what I mean? Like, I obviously you bring in a Mike Lombardi to just like you point, you go see Mike. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not dealing with that. But even let's just say he only gets one or two of those a year, right? Let's say one or two players, they get the gall and they go up to him. A guy like that, I just don't see him standing for it. And I mean, it forced Nick out, but I think someone like Bill he'll just find the right people and he'll talk to them and be like, let's get this under control. Cause like, again, that can be brought in not from a college perspective, but I'm thinking more from like a political perspective, which is how we got here in the first place, with the shared revenue, and that will take place that will go into effect next year. The other interesting aspect of this is where is UNC getting this money because they only spend on average, I think it was like $4 million on their roster. And they're looking to spend 20 to 32 million next year, including, like I said, this shared revenue. Where are they going to get this money? Are they hitting up MJ?
You
Like,
know, that school's got money coming out of every orifice you can imagine. Like there's a great restaurant in Chapel Hill called Top of the Hill. I wouldn't be surprised that entire hill is just made out of cash in terms of what they have between endowment and their entire system. That place is not strapped. They're just diverting resources into other things. So if they're finally going in to try to infuse cash into football, this is their time to do it. But with all those things that you said, I wonder if Bill's going to stick around long enough to even try doing that stuff because he sees if it's a circus, great. He can make his program what he wants for those couple years that he's there. But in terms of the larger circus that is college football, I don't see him as a guy that really wants to be at the forefront. Like as much as New England was on top of the world for as long as it was, you never really heard them like barking much at the top. It was just, and all you hear like the interviews with Matt Light and all of them, they always say the same thing. The one thing he always says is, do your job.
yeah,
Just
do your
do
job.
your
But
job.
that's exactly why I bring this up because here's the difference with the NFL. You pretty much have an ironclad system. It's a system like that's got very specific rules. It's got a very specific system set up that like creates a what's the word? That creates a parity, right? So you're
Yep.
not allowed to have dynasties, but this guy continues to do it. So you're not having the same issues. Like you're gonna have this guy's gonna be walking into like part of my French, but he's gonna be walking into a shit show. Like college
Yep.
football right now is a shit show, and again, when you have someone like Belichick, again, it's like Mario says something or the coach from Wake Forest says something, no one's really care. But when you have a 8-time Super Bowl winning coach say, "Hey, like let's get this cleaned up. Do your job." I think people will listen. And I think
It would
again, I don't know if that's what will happen. And again, this could all be just for 1 year so that Bill shows that he can coach a program, he can put something together, because again, I kept thinking, why UNC? I guess his dad was an assistant there in the 50s, but that's meaningless, right? And he made the analogy today, oh, well, my first words were beat Duke. Yeah, I'm sure they were. Um, Definitely not. But what a better audition you could possibly have than taking a program that is basically irrelevant in football, a mid to low tier program. No offense, Tar Heel fans, but you've never been relevant, and making it into something that's like, hey, like, are they going to the playoff? Are they going to be a national contender? Probably not. But they got their act together, and look what he did with this program.
Yep.
Go to the Browns. You know what I mean? Like, again, I mean, he was at the Browns for a little bit, but you know what I mean? Like, if we're doing reunions, let's just do it. Speaking of reunions, actually, because we should move on, there were other coaches in the coaching carousel this year. Rich Rod heading to West Virginia for another reunion. What are your thoughts on that, real quick?
Look, West Virginia hasn't been the same since he left all
This is
those
true.
years ago. And remember, Rich Rodriguez also has ties back to Miami from way back in the day.
That is true.
It's something that what I find interesting about Rich Rod is that, like, he was one of the originators of this like spread offense that he was trying to implement, 20 something years ago. I forget where he's been because I remember watching like a random college football game. It was like, oh yeah, Rich Rodriguez is leaving this team. And went, Rich Rod is still coaching?
Oh
I
yeah,
I
he Jackson
I
State, I
don't.
think, is where his last
Jacksonville
stop was at
State.
Jackson State. Yeah,
Was it Jacksonville State? Yeah, yeah, exactly. That was it was one of those like random like Tuesday, Wednesday night ESPN football games.
and he won
Um,
them the conference championship. No, Jackson. No, where did Jax? Is it
oh, you're
Jacksonville or
talking
is
about
it
Jackson State, the the
Jackson
the
State? Where
SWAC
Dion,
school?
where Prime was. He took
Oh,
over
okay.
he took over after Prime left, and he got them, and now they're like an FBS school, and he got them the championship in the SWAC, I think it was.
I just know that is it going to be enough to? I mean, look, don't get me wrong. The Big 12 is wide open, as you saw
Yeah,
happen with Arizona State this year. But the big question for me in terms of like that I have going into this is yes, he was the most successful West Virginia head coach that they've had.
absolutely. I
Does
agree.
that name still hold weight to help West Virginia get back to what they were doing? Which, granted, like there was that crazy year in like 2008 or whatever it was, where like three Big East schools were all number two in the country at one time with Greg Schiano at
Oh yeah,
Rutgers and
Rutgers and
Rich
USF.
Rod, right, and USF. Like,
Mhm.
can they get back to what that height was? Like, remember, West Virginia is a team that, and I think it was actually under Dana Holgerson who replaced Rich Rod, but
Yep.
they blew Clemson out in one of those Orange Bowl games in like 2011 or whatever it was. I
Yeah.
remember like singing country roads for like 3 hours straight with a couple of guys from the football team. Um, I don't know if does that really move the needle for West Virginia? Like, is that what's going to bring people to Morgantown?
I think so, and again, I think because we'll move on next. I think when you bring coaches, it's like again. This would be like if it was 2000. I want to say, when was Randy Shannon the coach?
He
Was he
started
before or
his
after
first year
Golden?
was '07.
So yeah, that's exactly. I was gonna say 0708. Imagine if in 0708 we were bringing Butch back. It's a very similar thing. It's like, hey, we had good times with you. We've seen some dark years. The program's seen better days. Let's bring you back at a minimum. You just steer the ship out of like the iceberg patches. At best, we can get into smooth seas. You know what I mean? Because you look at UCF, who just lost their coach to FSU, and they're bringing back Scott Frost.
Right,
You know
right.
what I mean? And it's like, I think you bring back these guys because again, it's the glory days. It's the undefeated national championship season at UCF, which no one ever recognizes, right? And it's like, again, not to say Scott Frost will make UCF a Big 12 contender, but it's a different time. He did well at UCF. I think the stage was too big. The lights were too bright for Nebraska. That prodigal son story was just too heavy for him. The pressure's off. It's like a old warm blanket he can go put back on at UCF. He knows where to get the recruiting kids from. Now he has a transfer portal. He also knows, hey, I need money. If you don't give me money, everyone's doing it. You're not going to get it. And UCF should have money when they have 65,000 students every year. You know, what I mean, if you get a couple $100 from each one, you're good.
I wonder how many of these are nostalgia pushes and how many of these are actually reputable. Because the thing about if you brought Butch back in like 2007, that's one thing. He would only have been gone for really about 7 years, where he
Right.
was in the NFL for a few of them. Rich Rod's been gone from West Virginia for a long time. Scott
Yeah,
Frost
like
hasn't been gone from
15 years.
UCF for too long.
No, yeah.
Um, yeah, Gus Malzahn, who's leaving UCF, is becoming the offensive coordinator at Florida State. Okay. let's see what happens with that. I mean, that's a capable coordinator under Mike Norvell, who's also supposed to be the offensive guru. So I don't
But
think
they,
the
but those their coaching style and their schemes are very similar. So to me, that was like kind of like slam dunk. I was like, that makes sense. And then they just got
Malzahn
Thomas
has to be the
Castellanos, who was with Malzahn. So it's all making sense. Like I feel like it's almost like one of the things like everything's kind of settling. Because did you hear the latest? Dan Mullen to UNLV.
he was definitely hungry for a coaching job.
It's
UNLV, don't get me
That's
wrong, like
perfect. I think that's
look,
perfect for him. There's zero pressure. It's a division that it's a conference now that's going to be without Boise State, so you can win. You're in Vegas. I think that's slam dunk for Dan Mullen. I mean he's like you said he's been itching to get back into coaching. I think now when recruiting isn't as pertinent to winning as it was 10, 15 years ago, where that was the only way to win. Um, even you don't even go that 5 years ago, 6 years ago, right? You don't need that. I think it's a slam dunk hire. I think it's been. This is what I'm saying. Like college football is rapidly changing. It's just you blink and it's like a completely different league. You got, like I said, Gus Malzahn going to FSU as their offensive coordinator. It's like, what are we doing?
hopefully we're the first ones to identify this, but there's one thing that I can't get out of my head when it comes to Dan Mullen going to Las Vegas. And all I think of is Randy Quaid from Vegas Vacation, because with the visor on, he looks
Yeah.
exactly like him. And since we've already, dropped a curse word once, I'm waiting for a sign that's going to have like Dan Mullen's face on the Randy Quaid character saying "shitter's full,"
Yeah.
because I hope we're the first ones to have that, because if I'm playing UNLV, hell, when Miami plays Utah in Las Vegas in like 2026, I'm bringing that sign.
You need to. You absolutely need to. Speaking of arcanes, on Monday, the transfer portal opened. I'm not sure what's going on, man. Do you think we're losing players, or do you think this is just like that they're second stringers? Will be good.
You're always going to lose a few players. You're always going to gain a few players. I mean, like, look, the departure of Chris Johnson kind of stinks, as you really wanted some speed. There's been already some tales of people saying that, like, dipping their toes in the portal, but then they end up coming back out. So, like, Robbie Washington, for example,
Yeah,
is staying after he was leaving, but his brother Bobby is still in the portal and leaving as a wide receiver. So, like, there's pieces like that. There's also a few, there's also people that you're going to lose possibly to the NFL draft, like a Sam Brown, wide receiver who just came in for 1 year, where if you look at his productivity, you look at his stats, all you can think of is it's better for you if you stay. But at the same time, you can't, one problem with Miami is that they've always had kids leave too early for the draft, and he might be the next one to do it. So uh, I think the names that are out there, like Johnson and AJ Allen, the running back, are the two that
yep,
really sting the most. But with the news that Damon Martinez might stay for another year,
that's true.
that makes sense. So
It
like,
does. That's yeah. So we've lost 7 players. I'll go through them real quick. Reese Poffengarter, Antonio Tripp, who's our offensive lineman, Chris Johnson, who you're referring to, AJ Allen, the other running back, Robbie Washington, who was a wide receiver DB, kind of flip, went back and forth, who was transitioning, Robert Stafford the third, who's a cornerback, and then Miles Moo Young, who we know you love and you sat next to his parents all season.
yeah,
Um, it seems like a lot of these departures are kind of does. Like they're like, no duh. Like you're looking at, I mean, Antonio Tripp, I just don't know where he was in the depth chart in terms of how much playing time he was getting. But Reese Poffengarder, Puff Daddy, whatever his name is, I can never say. Is it
Rowan Gardner,
Poffengarder? Poffengard,
Husenberger.
Poffenbarger, Durka Durka da Jihad. He was gone the second Cam sign because we got him right before, which I felt. I mean, I genuinely feel bad for the kid because like imagine, dude, you're like Miami gets denied Cam, door opens up for you, you go there, and immediately like Cam resends, comes here, you're not gonna play. So it was just like a matter of time. The Chris Johnson, AJ Allen really made me sad as well. But when you hear the rumors that Damian Martinez is thinking of coming back, which I didn't even know he had an extra year of eligibility, which is wild to me, it makes sense. And to me, that would be the only reason why they would leave,
Yeah,
because you look at those two players and if Damian Martinez was to leave, I think, yeah, Lyle, it would be Lyle and Fletcher. But
They
again,
need depth.
you need depth. Not only that, but we saw what happened, maybe not this year, but last year when we lost our running backs. Immediately, it's necessary, you know? And so it's just like one of those things where it's just like, I understand why you're leaving, but it's like, man, there's still that space. But if Damian Martinez is coming back, then yeah, then you're not going to see the field whatsoever. There are some prospects to consider. There's some people that are visiting. Let me go through this list really quick. We have visiting Miami. We have Kentucky defensive lineman Keyshawn Silver, FIU receiver Eric Rivers, Arizona cornerback transfer Emmanuel Carnley, USF corner Chasen Johnson, and Liberty guard center Jordan White. Which of these gets you going? Which one of these do you feel like is going to help or could be possibly be an immediate plug and play kind of guy?
The answer is yes. It's as simple as that. The
You like
answer
all
is
of them, really?
the problem is like, look, from like not knowing much about all of these players, the only sniff test that doesn't seem to make much sense would be that cornerback from USF. But there is a common denominator there because Demarcus Van Dyke, who was a defensive analyst for Miami, a Miami alum, NFL, defensive back, is the defensive backs coach at USF. So to have a
UCF.
talent, oh, okay, UCF. I heard
Yeah.
USF on there. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think outside of him, I think they need to get some more power four kind of defensive players. Like there's a safety out of Purdue. His last name's Thieneman.
Yep.
That's a
I
guy that I
have him
want to
on.
see come for a visit.
Yeah.
But the others, like defensive tackles, yes, Miami absolutely needs it because even though Ahmad Moten is coming back for another year and that's great, you're losing a few one and dones like a Simeon Barrow, CJ Clark. Simeon Barrow really turned it on the end of the year. CJ Clark was a filler guy, but I think I expected more from him coming from NC State, but they run a three down lineman versus Miami usually going for a four down line,
Yep.
setup. The receiver from FIU is interesting because he set the single season like
I saw
passing
that.
yards record. And there was a little guy named T.Y. Hilton that Mario Cristobal knows very well that used to play there and had a great career in the NFL. So him doing something that T.Y. Hilton do is pretty interesting. I think he accounted for like 46% of all passing yards
Yeah.
last year, like receiving yardage. So look, I'm happy to have more plug and play offensive weapons because you're losing some receivers. You're losing Jacoby George, you're losing
Yep.
Xavier Restrepo. You possibly might lose Sam Brown. And granted, you've got Isaiah Horton that's left. You got some true freshmen like JoJo Trader, or who's going to be a sophomore next year. You have Nikar, who you haven't seen yet. That's supposed to be the next Tank Dell for Shannon Dawson that he had over at Houston all those years ago. But I would not blink an eye to have another guy who already understands how to work inside and outside, who hopefully can block because the issues with the wide receivers when we had struggles on offense is when they would throw those quick screens and you could not block, to save your life. So
Yeah, what's concerning to me about these wide receivers that they're bringing in that are visiting, which is why I want to talk about when we can talk about other prospects that we'd like to see. And even like the Singleton Jr. from Georgia Tech, he's like the number one transfer
yeah,
portal guy. The problem is they don't have size. None of these guys have size. And I think that is something Miami has struggled to like have and develop for the last 5-10 years. They're just like a standout alpha wide out. You know what I mean? Like we have great slot guys and we've had great slot guys and we've had some great undersized wide receivers, but I would love to get like a 6'3", 6'5", wide receiver that we can just like chuck it up. And that doesn't require an Emery or a Luke Nickel who's coming in next year to like have to thread the needle. You know what I mean? Especially when we're talking about the playoff and you're going to be playing against SEC DBs and you're going to be playing against Big Ten DBs. Like we need some size. That said, if these guys are quick, if they can go up and still get it, I mean, if you're telling me that these guys who are 5'11", 5'10", still have the same vertical leap as a guy who's 6'3", then I don't care. I mean, whatever. Do you, boo boo? You know what I mean? Go get that ball. But uh, one thing we have, I mean, and maybe you have a better memory than me, but can you remember the last time we had an alpha stand out wide receiver that was tall? Not your Restrepos or your Barrioses, but like I'm trying to think.
There's a couple that come to mind. You're talking
But
about
we
like
get
a
to go back to like
Leonard.
2017, right?
Well, I would go back even further than that. I'm talking about like Leonard Hankerson, for example.
Boy, yeah, look how far Hankerson, bro.
Yeah, yeah, that
That's a
Alan
long
Hearns, who
time.
was a pretty good receiver, exactly.
Alan Hearns, yeah.
If you look at guys, so oh my God, what was his name? So there was one from the 2017 season, but the problem with him was he wasn't really a dominant receiver. He was Amon Richard is going to be the
Yeah,
guy that really stands out. Who poor guy got hurt really early, right as he was beginning to take off in his career. But that was your physical, tall, athletic wide receiver that could one hurdle guys and two lay out vicious blocks that end up hurting safeties down the line. Like I'm looking at that Florida State game from 20, I think it was 2017. It was like the last game that he had,
yeah.
um, going through. So that's the last like most recent case. But if
That's
you're
7 years
looking at
ago.
like,
It's 2
yeah,
classes. That's like 2
yeah,
full classes if you think about it. You know what I mean? Like we've gone through 2 full graduating classes and we haven't had one. And so, and then going even to your point about blocking, right? Like I would rather have a guy 6 foot plus blocking than a guy who's below sub 6 foot. You know what I mean? Like it's just again,
yeah, like
it just it
that's
go ahead.
yeah, like that's where if you're Isaiah Horton, you should be like chomping at the bit to say like I'm the big guy that's here. I didn't get as many targets as I wanted last year because I had to fight for for distribution with Jacoby George and with Xavier Restrepo and with Sam Brown, but Singleton still sticks out in mind because Miami struggled against Georgia Tech secondary, against Virginia Tech secondary, and against Syracuse to an extent. And a lot of that is how the play is dictated, how it's being officiated on the field. And those were games that defensive backs were allowed to be very physical. Those are ones that they were allowed to grab your
Yeah.
jersey, hold you back, to get physical separation from somebody. And look, Eric Singleton had to go against that Georgia Tech secondary every single day in practice. So if there's somebody who knows how to, work with some of those, he might be a guy that can teach you a few tricks or may have a little bit of intel on that side of how they play these different schemes. But yeah, definitely, it's good to have a little bit of size so you can be more versatile on offense.
The reason why I'm not so hot on him too is because when I did the research for the Georgia Tech game, I noticed that he's kind of a running back kind of hybrid. You know what I mean? Because a lot of the stuff Georgia Tech did with him was like jet sweeps and quick dumpy passes. He can have a deep threat from time to time, but when you really look at the tape and you look at how they utilize him, he's not your traditional wide receiver. You know what I mean? Where you can go up, throw it up, and he'll go get it. You know what I mean? He's kind of more like a flex player. I would look at him more like.
Mhm.
And so that's I don't know if that's necessarily something that we really need. I mean, again, how many 6 foot plus wide receivers are out there in the transfer portal that are going to make an immediate impact? Not many. But again, wouldn't be mad we got him, but I'm also not sitting there ready to throw the bag at him, which
Yeah,
is kind of like my next question for you is what do you think Miami's biggest and most urgent needs are? I know the duh statement is cornerback, but if like you could pick a player we have, you're talking about the safety from Purdue. Do you think he would be an immediate help? Do you think it's kind of like, okay, it's just better than what we've got? What do you see as the biggest and most urgent need?
I mean, outside of the secondary, it's defense. Period.
Yeah,
You need defensive tackles. You need. I would go and I would actually say you probably need a couple like a linebacker as well, but you really definitely need help at I think it's safety. It's free safety and strong safety because your corners should be pretty good. When OJ Frederick had himself a decent year, he looked bad against Syracuse, which was unfortunate after having a great season. Damari Brown came back very, very, very late, so he's literally going to play maybe 2 full game. Well, actually, no, he's going to play 1 full game if he plays the Pop Tarts Bowl. He played a
right.
little bit against Syracuse. He got hurt against Florida, so you should be okay. But you need depth
Yeah,
and you need secondary. Like that's where your biggest miscommunication was. Linebacker, you have guys coming back, but you really don't. The problem with the linebacker position is that you really only have one or two on the field at any given time now. You don't really run a 4-3 defense. You're running nickel. And if you get third and long, you're likely running an extra, you're actually running an extra defensive backs. You're running like a dime formation and you're just rushing with your linebacker and your four defensive linemen. Um, that's where I think the issue really stands because if you can get yourself some defensive backs that can defend tight ends, can defend running backs, can go after your wide receivers, that's where you're going to help. And you need to free up your linebacker because if you expect your linebacker to run in coverage against all these really, really fast running backs and tight ends, you're screwed. And you saw
Yeah.
it happen, like, no knock on Kiko Mauinoa, he came back from a shoulder injury, but every time you had to see him and look, there's cases where he's out covering somebody, not because that's a failure of the scheme, it's a failure of communication where whoever is supposed to be covering that guy isn't doing it. So he goes
Mm,
out there and lines up to do it.
that's true.
That's where your communication's lacking. That's where you need a leader. And look, go back to Miami history. Some of your best defenses are anchored by very good defensive backs. I screwed up on Monday with Dono when I mentioned Antrell Roll. He was a cornerback instead of a safety, but still, he was a dominant cornerback that played
Yeah.
all over the field. You talk about a Sean Taylor at safety. Let's even give James Williams and Cam Kinchins their flowers because we kind of
Oh
underappreciated them last
man.
year. If they were on this defense, we would be
Oh,
in the college football playoff.
oh,
Let's put it there.
1,000,000,000%. Absolutely. A lot of the defensive players, especially in the secondary in the last 2 or 3 years that we kind of really kind of overlooked and like we're like, yeah, we took you for granted. You know what I mean? Like you look at it now, you don't have these players like, okay, yeah, like this is pretty serious. Then there's the $1,000,000 question this offseason. Do we go out and get a QB in the portal or do we invest in what we got?
Look, the names that they've mentioned as transfer rumors for right now, I don't know if that's anything to really hang your hat on and say that this is an immediate improvement because look, Emory Williams looked great in his two, games. Well, his two big showings for Miami last year. He broke his arm in that final drive against Florida State, where Miami almost won that game. And you could argue that they were actually driving down to win that game.
Yeah.
He wasn't asked to do much, but he, played within his means there. They beat Clemson with him making throws
Yeah.
when he had to, where it was very run heavy and relying on your defense. But there's something to be said for having players that play for your quarterback and Emery's always seemed to have that respect of the
That's
locker
true.
room.
He does have the
And
respect of the
he's
locker room.
he's had a year to work under Cam Ward. He's understood like it's another person that you can ask a million times, what are you seeing on this play? Coming back on the sideline and asking what's going on with this, learning that offense even more. Granted, he played, he had some garbage time reps against teams. Like he came in a little bit, I think, with Florida State. He came in against like what was that? What was that team? It wasn't Miami, Ohio this year. It
I
was
think it was Duke.
well, he came in against Duke, but he also came in early in the year, like against Florida A&M, and there was another like MAC team that we played
Yeah.
early on, Bowling Green, I think it was, where he came in and look, it's one thing to look good against those teams, but he knows where to go with the ball. He's decisive. He seems like he understands the offense. It's at least going to be competition. So if you bring in a guy from the portal and you say you're going to come here and compete, that's one thing like they asked Reese Poffenbarger to do. They didn't guarantee him the starting spot outright. But
Right.
when Cam Ward comes in, or, there was a time where Will Howard at Ohio State was also rumored to come to Miami, came, visited, and everything. Those are really the only two guys that you'd say you're not gonna, redshirt Emery for another year afterwards. If you don't have someone like that, I think you go with what you got.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think just for the future of the program, you have to show an investment in what you've recruited because you're not going to get a perennial quarterback from a high school if you can't show that you can't develop them. I mean, and again, I don't know. I'm not saying we can't, but it's not like we've really shown we can develop a quarterback. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like how many quarterbacks have we sent to the draft? You know what I mean? Like not many. And then on top of that, how many have panned out? So to me, I think you make the investment in Emery knowing that you're probably going to go to Luke Nickel the year after. You're going to give Luke Nickel next year. You'll redshirt him. Let him get some reps, but with the hope that he's the future because he's pretty good, and I think he's a 4-star or 5-star quarterback. So he's got the acumen and he's got the build too. So we'll see where that goes. But I agree. I think we need to stay in house. Last question before we move on. Who are you keeping an eye on? Who is someone either you think is going to come, a dream? Who are you keeping an eye on in the transfer portal this go around?
Let's see if something actually happens with Jeremiah Smith. Let's
Oof.
see if something actually happens there because that would be so nice. I look, that's the one where it's like it's the wish list. It's not a likelihood of it happening. It's not a rumor mill anything. This is just a look. Santa already gave us our bag of coal, our lump of coal for this season. But if there was
Yeah.
one gift that was able to come, that would be really nice in terms of happening. But that's That's all I have on my side. I mean, I would rather Miami get every top defensive player in the portal that they could than
Oh
get
yeah.
Jeremiah Smith. But yeah,
Mine, I don't really have one because my focus is development because I think this year was one of those years where it's kind of like you win now, but like you understand that you're going to be sacrificing the next years. Like we're going to talk about this in the real off season. Um, don't expect much, fans. This is a flash in the pan. And what happens with the flash in the pan? It goes up really high and then it settles down. And I think next year will be a settling down season. And I think we need to focus on development. I think if we can bring players in, great. Do spend your money wisely. Okay. Don't pull a Simeon Barrow. Don't pull a Baron again. Not to say that those guys were trash or that they weren't worth a bag, but I think we may have overpaid for them a little bit. And we have, I mean, as archaic sometimes as Dabo Sweeney is considered, I still think the points he makes about the transfer portal are valid to a certain extent, which is you're getting players who are either B talent or they're players who are like mercenaries. He said three, he gave three criteria, but those are the two that to me really stick out. And it's the truth. Like you're not, you're people like look at our 7 exits, right? They're not starters. They're not key players. They're not game changers for our team. Their depth, which helps, but every team is dealing with depth issues now. That's just the name of the game now. It's like basic, like it's not going to be anymore. College football will not be who's the best team. It's going to be who's the healthiest team. Like that's going to be who wins national championships is who's the healthiest. So
and who's playing their best football at the end of the year?
yeah, and
Yeah.
so to me, it's like let's get to back to developing and Jeremiah Smith. The reason why I'm not trying to poo poo your idea, I think it's a brilliant idea. I just see Ohio State, unless they lose in the first round and their quarterback room implodes and everyone like jumps ship, their quarterback room is, I think, exponentially better than our quarterback room. I think the people they have, the Air Jordan, whatever his name is, Air Nolan or whatever his name is, and the other guys they have like 2 or 3 studs just waiting in the wings. Again, you know, that could all implode. I mean, I'll make a decision later on, but yes, hopefully we can bring Jeremiah Smith home, but I just think their QB room is a little bit better, and I think he wants to play with a proven. And he's look at him. He's showing you what he can do. So if he's gonna go anywhere, he's gonna go. I mean, God, I would hate this, but Oregon. You know what I mean? Like, but I don't know what Oregon's gonna do next year because I don't know what their backup quarterback looks like, and they've been portal guys like we have, but that's a slippery slope,
The only
aka
thing
FSU.
the only thing is he wouldn't go to Oregon because Dylan Gabriel throws the ball for 7, 8 yards. Like he doesn't they don't
No, but
push
Dylan Gabriel's
down.
not going to be there next year. That's what I'm saying. So, like, I don't know who Oregon's going to have next year. I mean, there's like 20, I think there's 20 Power Four teams that are going to find a new quarterback next year, whether it's
Yeah.
someone they're developing with inside or someone they have to go to the transfer portal. But there are 20 quarterbacks who are starting now who will not be here next year. So,
There's only 2 quarterbacks in the history of Oregon football that I know of that threw a ball beyond 25 yards that was any good. That was Joey Harrington, bust in the
yep,
NFL, but he was a great quarterback in college. And, I think the other one was Justin Herbert. That's about
yeah,
it. Like
that
if you
is.
look back at like Marcus Mariota, he wasn't slinging the ball all over the place. He was running and he was dinking and dunking all the way through. So it's
That's
it's
true.
interesting to see like different programs have identities that span decades. So for him to go out there, it's kind of a waste of talent.
Well, if you want to help me and Rudy out, anyone who's watching this and donate to buying a plane to go around Columbus saying, come to Miami, Jeremiah Smith, like we will happily start a GoFundMe to bring Jeremiah Smith home. So you just let us know if that's what you want us to do. I think it's better than the fire Mario planes that we can have out front of Hard Rock Stadium. So let's just try and bring Jeremiah Smith home. But Rudy, we actually have some football this weekend. It is the 125th edition of America's Game between Army and Navy. Both teams beat Air Force this season, meaning the winner of this game takes home the coveted Commander-in-Chief's trophy. It's only the 8th time since the trophy was created in 1972 that this is the case where two teams can be playing in this game for the trophy. So it's kind of exciting. It's the first time since 2017. 2017 is a big year. I don't know why it keeps coming around. Army won the trophy last year, but still remains in third place all time with only 10. Navy is second with 16. And Air Force, which I had no idea, has 21 victories in the commander in chief's trophy. Who do you got and why?
I hate to say that this game is also called the "We Got Blown Out by Notre Dame" Bowl, which
I
which
love that.
I
That's a great name for a bowl.
I hate that because I wanted both of these teams to beat Notre Dame in the worst way. Army's been on a tear in
Yeah.
this rivalry. Like, it's
They
something that
just won the
Navy owned it for
AAC.
the right, like, Navy owned this for the longest time, and then it was, like, 2017 or whatever it was when Army, like, won for the first time in, like, a decade, and they just haven't let up since, and look, like you said, they won the conference. They were the better of the 2 teams playing
Oh,
Notre Dame.
yeah.
Go Army, beat Navy.
I'm with you, man. Army's QB Bryson Daly comes into the game with 1,400 rushing yards, which is insane. Actually, nearly 1,500. It's like 1,480, and throwing for only 877. But he has 37 total touchdowns. His 29 touchdowns are tied for Boise State running back and Heisman finalist Ashton Genty. So, fun fact: the only person who's run as much as Ashton Genty touchdown wise is this guy Daly. And then you look. I mean, Navy started the season really hot, but they have become a rudderless ship, dropping 3 of the last 5 games. Statistically, this is not even close when I looked it up. Like, Army blows away the midshipmen in both offensively and defensively in almost every major stat. Army has a longer time of possession. They're nearly 7 minutes longer. They're averaging more yards, passing and rushing per play. I mean, both teams are averaging just around 30 points a game, but Army is outscoring opponents by 16 compared to Navy, who's only outscoring them by 7, which is that defense that Army has. So I'm going Army by a landslide. I don't think this is going to be even. This isn't even going to be a close game. I think this should be a blowout. I do love. It's funny. I could care less about this game a lot of times, but I do love the pageantry around it because it literally fits into like it's like if you're like, hey, like show me like a stereotypical like college football game, I'd be like, okay, yeah, we'll show you Ohio State, Michigan. We'll show you like Bama, LSU, or Texas, Oklahoma. But I think just the pageantry of this game and the way all the like the cadets walk out and all the like to me that is so freaking cool. And then like they bring the Blackhawks over and then the Navy has the Jets fly over and it's like a dick measuring contest and I love it. I'm like, yes. I'm like, all I keep saying is like, I mean, we've already cursed, so who gives a shit? But it's like, America, fuck yeah, here to
Exactly.
save. It's like, that's all you think about when you watch this game. And it's like, it's funny, when I was doing the research for this game, bro, you look at these guys, they didn't even get the $600 from NCAA football. Like they like these guys play for Army, they play for Navy. It's like the last vestige of like traditional college football. You know what I mean? Like these guys, like they're talented, some of them, and could play at like a D1 at most D1 schools, maybe not a power 4, but at least a D1 school. And they're choosing to like subject themselves to like this incredible torment of being a soldier or a midshipman because like I was like reading their days, like both the cadets at both military institutions, they get up roughly around 6 a.m. and they're not back in their dorm rooms till 9 p.m.
Yep.
like every day. Like that's a long ass day,
And
and then
there's a really cool thing too about the at West Point, the Army, the U.S. Military
yep,
Academy, where they have assigned like groups at lunch that they eat with, and it's always a mixture of like some of the freshmen who they call plebes and the sophomores, the juniors, and the seniors. They have like these lunch tables that they're all together, and they will switch them up like every semester. But then there's also groups that always have to like that rotate serving lunch and cleaning up. And I think all of that gets done in like a 45-minute span, which is absolutely insane to feed, 1,000 something people in
yeah,
that amount of time. You're mentioning that this is like, the last stand of traditional college football. Up until this past couple of years, even the offenses look like the last
yeah,
holdout of traditional
yeah,
college football.
literally.
where the forward pass was still kind of like a foreign concept in this game.
Yeah, it was still like, "Ooh, we passed the ball.
Triple
Ooh,
option
oh shit."
football.
Yeah. Yeah, so I have Army as well, blowing out Navy. It should be fun. I also love this game too because sometimes they break out the really cool uniforms, which
Yep.
I didn't get a chance to look that up yet, and I'm a big uni watch kinda guy. So, it'll be interesting to see what unis they wear because both come out with awesome uniforms sometimes each year. So, it'll be cool to see what they're wearing on Saturday, and I'm excited that we have football this Saturday before we head into the college football playoffs. But Rudy, we have made it through another show, another one in the books. Thank you for watching, y'all. I normally do not say like, comment, and subscribe till the end because you know what? I don't want to be a salesman. But if you've made it this far, like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you think. Until next week, be good, y'all. Win the weekend. And as always, go Canes.
Lou Holtz will tell you to like, comment, and subscribe.
Please do it for Lou Holtz for at a bare minimum. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for watching, y'all.